Hi there, it's John Pushkar, and I'm here today with another episode to help protect you in the world of fuels and combustion systems.
Over the last 40 years, I've developed and led fuels and combustion equipment safety programs for the largest manufacturers in the world. Today, I'm bringing you knowledge, insights, and best practices about fired equipment and natural gas safety. Over the next few minutes, you'll get the kind of practical, real-life explanations that I've become known for.
I don't know about you, but this is not anything I'd ever like to look up and see. Although it would be welcoming from one perspective, it would be horrifying from another perspective. Today's episode is all about how to try to avoid being involved in a flash fire. Flash fires are defined as fires that are somewhat diffuse in nature, that typically last 3 seconds or less. These fires are something that you can encounter if you happen to be in possibly a room full of flammable gases and suddenly it's ignited. Poof, it's over in a flash. But in just those few seconds, your life could be changed forever, because it just takes fractions of a second for 2,000 and 3,000 degree flames to horribly burn your skin and change your life forever. One of my good friends, Sean George, experienced just this kind of event many, many years ago. And I want to show you a little bit of a clip out of one of his training videos that tells you exactly what kind of things can happen in just a few seconds that can change your life forever. By the way, I've included a link to his website in the comments section. He has some very valuable things to say about this topic and industrial safety in general. So please check out his website and materials.
Our job now was to bleed that system of any air in it and get the gas flowing to this unit heater and get a pilot light lit. At one point, John had asked for a hose bib and a garden hose. He wanted to put a hose bib on that valve and then snake the hose to the outside air so that whatever was in there would be bled to the outside. Couldn't find one, and there was no interest in getting one. So John climbed up on the tank, I got up on the ladder, and this is what was waiting for us, 1.5 inch gas cock. And when the handle is perpendicular to the valve body like this, of course, it's closed. When we got up there, this is what we were faced with. The valve was closed. So to start this process of purging the system, it wasn't rocket science. We just tapped the valve open. And I could hear a slight trickle of gas coming into the room, or air. And I could, so I leaned forward on my ladder. I was 19. It was my first job. You know, I didn't know anything about fitting. I knew this was natural gas. I knew that if I breathed it, I could die. I knew that it was volatile. I knew that it could explode. And I was concerned. And I kept my eyes on John. I was looking for visual cues. And I leaned forward and I put my nose right in front of that valve. I wanted to be able to smell gas the second it came into the room. And that's the position I took watching John. So we did that for a while. And then we closed the valve and we went over to the corner and we tried to light that pilot light that I'd mentioned earlier. We couldn't get it lit. So we bled the system right from that unit heater for a while, and we tried to light it again. We still couldn't get it lit. So we went back to our positions of bleeding this system. And this went on all morning long. I'd mentioned we four were in there the whole time, John and I and the two electricians. You can become desensitized to odors. So if in fact there was gas coming in the room, if we'd been in there all morning long, we might not have been able to smell it, to detect it. But there were other workers coming in and out constantly from the fresh air who would have smelled it. No one ever smelled gas all morning long. And we did that until lunchtime. And then we broke for lunch. John came back, and we decided, remember, there's a sense of urgency. Get this done. We changed the way we were doing business, and we opened the valve all the way. Now, it wasn't just a trickle now. Now there was like a shrill screaming noise, and there was a lot of slag blowing into the room. So I didn't lean forward with my nose in front of the valve this time. But I kept an eye on John across the room. And again, we'd close the valve, go over, try to light the pilot light. Could not get it lit. It was about 1:15 or 1:30. I remember I had looked down for just a moment, and something across the room got my attention. And when I looked up, John's valve was on fire. There were blue flames shooting into the room about 6 to 8 feet. You know, I started this by saying no one expects an accident at work, and I wasn't expecting this. And when I first saw it, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I actually just froze and looked because I thought, this can't be happening. It wasn't planned. And I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Well, then my valve ignited in orange flames shortly after that, and I reached up and grabbed the handle on it to close it, a knee-jerk response. By the time my hand was on the handle, there was an explosion that was absolutely thunderous. It rocked the building, and it blew me off of that ladder I was on. Those two electricians were picked right up off their feet and blown out that doorway, and a wall upstairs caved in and buried one of them. John was blown into the tank. When I hit the deck, I fractured my wrist. I talked to a fellow years later who lived a couple of miles from there, and he said it was so intense, he thought that it was a commercial airliner coming down. Greater Pittsburgh Airport was right out that way. It was thunderous, absolutely thunderous. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. But I was on the deck now with a fractured wrist, and of course that's what I'm paying attention to. I wasn't looking for John or the electricians. I wasn't looking around. I was hanging onto my wrist. And again, I noticed something, some kind of activity across the room, and I looked over to where that interior door was, where the stairwell was, and the air just lit on fire. There was a wall of flame at the end of the room, and it was sweeping through the room, coming right at me. So as soon as I saw it, I jumped to my feet, and I turned to begin to run to that door. But by the time I was standing, I was wrapped in these flames from the knees up. So I ran out. That's what I did. I ran for the door, and I ran outside to save my life. It's the only thing I could do. I'd mentioned one of the electricians was buried. Didn't know this till earlier this year. I actually ran right over top of him to get out, and I passed the other guy up. You can run very fast when you're on fire, I got to tell you. When I got upstairs, this is what was waiting for me. The wall was actually blown out, and I talked to a gentleman who saw it, and he said it was the most amazing thing he'd seen in his life. Giant fireball blowing out of the side of the building. And this is the rubble that I ran across, still on fire, when I got outside. An apprentice saw me, and he yelled at me to hit the deck, so I did. I rolled into a puddle. It was September. Luckily, it was rainy, and I ended up face down in this puddle. I could look down. I could see all the skin hanging off my hands. The apprentice came over with a journeyman and finished tamping me out. And I noticed immediately I couldn't move. I went to get up, and I just couldn't move. Interestingly, the very first thought that went through my mind, the first one, when I was lying in that puddle was, I'll never be able to describe this pain to anyone. It was absolutely off the charts. Absolutely. It was a 65% burn. And I haven't been able to, and that's probably a good thing, but absolutely excruciating. The two fellows with me kept pouring ice water on me and offering words of encouragement. I didn't know where John was. I didn't know where the electricians were. I want to go back down into the boiler room for a minute because there's something important, a couple things that I want to touch on. And the first is, for years and years after this accident, I just assumed I'd been in there for at least 30 or 45 seconds. I would have had to have been to sustain the injuries that I did. I finally got to go back to that boiler room, and I got the dimensions of the room, and I went near where I lived at the time on a high school football field, and I took rope and I laid out the perimeter of that room. And I used duct tape to mark where I would have been, where John would have been, where the doors would have been. And I went to Kmart, and I picked up a stopwatch. I was curious. So I stood in the spot where I would have been after I was blown off the ladder, and I started the watch. And I walked at a normal pace over to the corner of the room. Now remember, I was sprinting back in 1975. Now I was just walking. The watch said 8 seconds, which I knew was wrong, so I reset it. It was new. And I did it a second time, and it said 8 seconds again. That blew me away. I couldn't believe walking at a normal pace, 8 seconds? I was thinking surely 30 or 45 seconds. There was a young fella kicking a soccer ball around there, 19 years old, and I had him stand in the same spot, and I timed him twice. Only I had him sprint, and it took him 3 seconds to cover the same distance. That blew me away. This whole accident, you know, all the damage that it did was over in 3 to 8 seconds. That little bit of time, boom, it was over. And the interesting thing, one of the things that was interesting to me at the time was, during that accident, time seemed to stand still. And rather than it being like watching a video, it was like seeing a series of snapshots. And it provided me a lot of time to think. It was like blue flames, orange flames, explosion, wall of flame, tick, 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 like that. And it seemed to take forever. But by the time the orange flames were coming out of my valve, here's what I was thinking. I snapped out of the trance that I had originally experienced when I saw those blue flames, and I realized this is an accident. This is what we're involved in. This is an accident, and it wasn't supposed to happen. And what I was painfully aware of was this. There was nothing we could do to stop it. The point at which we could have prevented it was past. We'd passed the point of no return, and we were all at the mercy of this accident. The 4 people in that room were completely at the mercy of this incident. And it was without regard for human life, totally without conscience.
So hopefully now you get it. This is not something to take lightly. I want to talk next about a couple of preventive measures that you can take. One of them, and the most powerful, of course, I believe, is to avoid being in an area where there's a flammable mixture. How do you avoid this? Well, hopefully you have access to monitors, personal monitors that you would wear. If not, it's something that you should encourage folks to look into. These are not horribly expensive anymore. They're not complicated to use. What it's all about, though, is not just owning the monitor, but it's about having a program where you regularly calibrate and test these devices before they're used. Even with monitors, you can still run into trouble. So the next place to really help yourself is with FRC Clothing. And FRC is an acronym for flame-resistant clothing. This can mean many things to many different people, but generally the industry-accepted definition is that it allows you to have less than a 50% body burn in a diffuse flame, quick, 3-second or less flash fire. This is what NFPA 2112 defines as FRC clothing. To really understand the entire world of FRC clothing, you need to look into 2 NFPA standards. One is NFPA 2112 and the other is NFPA 2113. 2112 talks about requirements for something to be able to be called FRC clothing. 2113 talks about the care and maintenance of FRC clothing. Yes, there's care and maintenance. It's not just owning it, but it's owning it, it's maintaining it, and it's wearing it correctly. And wearing it correctly means wearing natural cloth undergarments, like cotton undergarments, so that there's an insulating effect. So I hope you can now understand. Personally, I wouldn't want to own something that just provides like 40 to 50% body burn, so it's officially called an FRC garment. Not many people survive a 50% body burn. You'd have to be very young and very healthy. As you move forward in your journey in the work world, whether you're a plumber, a pipe fitter, someone who works in a refinery, or someone who works in a wastewater treatment plant where methane's generated, flash fire hazards are real. I've put links to documents and cases where people have been badly disfigured or have died from flash fires in a number of different industries. I could put dozens in here. Hopefully you don't need much more than watching this video to understand how important this topic really is. I'm going to leave you with one more clip.
June 9th, 2009, the Conagra Slim Jim plant near Garner, North Carolina. A catastrophic explosion resulted from the accumulation of dangerous levels of natural gas during indoor purging of new piping.
You think come an emergency, you're just going to jump on top of things and you're going to be just like the TV and, you know, Superman and save everybody. It's funny, it gets surreal. And I couldn't even remember how to dial 911.
What I want to emphasize to you out of her comments are that once the incident starts to occur, there's then no time to recover and no time to take action. Sean George says the same thing as well. The time for acting on this is now, prior to the incident. So I'm going to leave you with this. Again, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that it has impacted you, and I hope that you will take this seriously, and I hope that you will consider obtaining monitors, obtaining FRC clothing, looking at what you have, if you already have FRC clothing, making sure it's maintained properly, and of course, wearing it properly. Thank you again for watching this video. Hi, it's John Pushkar. I hope you found this episode useful. If you'd like to know about more ways that I can help, you can check out my website at www.prescientts.com. There you'll find information about the Prescient Technical Services Online School, my book, Fuels and Combustion System Safety, What You Don't Know Can Kill You, and also about some of the consulting projects that I've been providing to clients for the past 40 years. Things like implementing inspection and testing programs on a corporate enterprise-wide level, things like reviewing and commenting on capital equipment purchases that involve combustion equipment, and even being a legal expert if things go really wrong. Once again, thank you for attending, and remember, be safe out there. The life you save, it just might be yours.